Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Friday, January 9th, and the MLB offseason, she keeps chugging along. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, since we last spoke, I guess some news because the arbitration figure exchange deadline has come and gone, and the Blue Jays, of course, a little bit active there. But beyond that, we are still kind of sitting in the world of rumors.
Yeah, there's some hard news in the way of, Varsho and Clement and Heineman and Lauer. But I think the biggest news that isn't really news is the Bichette stuff, all coming down in the last 24-ish hours or so. And of course, a little bit of Tucker stuff, not too much, but we continue to wait on the biggest fish in free agency at this point.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when you think of like when we entered free agency, and we're kind of talking as like our on our preview, we're talking Bo, we're talking Tucker, we're talking Framber Valdez, we're talking Ranger Suarez, obviously Dylan Cease is in those conversations, but a lot of those guys that we were talking about, they're still available on the free agent market. But let's try and make sense of this Bo stuff because this time of year very good for some positioning, some trying to get markets going, trying to increase prices. And I guess we can start with, John Heyman obviously releases the report yesterday that the Yankees are more seriously entertaining the the Bo Bichette or Bo Bichette in free agency. And of course, in that same piece drops that Bichette is thought to be thinking or thought to be asking for $300 million. The Yankees stuff, I mean, to me, kind of reads as the Yankees are trying to push Bellinger to a resolution because that seemingly has been their priority all along. And I think the other report came out from The Athletic yesterday that they had offered him a deal with a $30 million AAV. And, if you're Cody Bellinger, who's apparently asking for 7 years, like there's just so much going on there. But the Bo stuff is certainly interesting. I think for our purposes, the $300 million ask is certainly like the most notable thing because that's not necessarily something that the Yankees may be kind of pushing out there like that. But I mean, what did you kind of make of that whole report? And then we can kind of get into the Philly stuff after that.
Yeah, so we had kind of heard a little bit that the number for Bichette was going to be between, kind of 250 to 300. But this is really the first genuine confirmation from an insider to publicly release this number. Now, Bichette wants $300 million. I want a Ferrari and I want a I want a Lamborghini and I want $1 million mansion and Bichette can want $300 million. I don't know that there's a team in baseball that sees a Bichette comparison, especially with him as a second baseman or a third baseman, that's going to give him that kind of cash. Now, he is going to get paid. I don't think that much is a question. But to me, I just don't really see where that number is a reality. Maybe 5, 10 years ago, but it doesn't seem to me like if that number was on the table, there'd be a deal done at this point, right?
Yeah.
So clearly he's going to end up coming in less than that $300 million mark, but who's going to hit, even the 250 mark, never mind the 300 mark.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, teams are paying like $11 million for a win on the free agent market. So if you're paying him, $300 million, you're banking on him being worth like 30 or 27 to 30 wins over the course of that contract. And for Bo, who is in the middle of his prime through his career right now, he's at 20 career wins. So you would basically be betting on him repeating what he's done so far through his next 7 years and then adding on like another couple of like really good years on that contract. And for the way that he's aged, obviously we've seen the speed decline, we've seen maybe some of the athleticism decline, we've seen him deal with lower body injuries in each of the past 3 seasons. So It's certainly 300 million is a large ask, but I mean, at the same time, like go get your money if you're Bo. Who knows kind of where it will fall. Obviously, you kind of look at you're comparing him to maybe other shortstops at that point, right? You're looking at the guys who have signed $300 million deals, and it's Francisco Lindor, it's Trey Turner, it's Corey Seager, Fernando Tatis signed when he was a shortstop, right? But is Bo Bichette in that group? Um, Based on maybe what he does on the defensive side of the ball, you're maybe not quite there, but yeah, certainly interesting to see that that's the number. And does that? I mean, from a Blue Jays perspective, like how does that kind of impact your impression of his market for the Jays?
I mean, it seems like posturing really right now. I think that it's kind of an anchoring situation where, it comes out that, he's looking for $300 million. And, it comes out, oh, teams are only willing to give him $200 million. And it's like, oh, what a steal on Bichette. But it's still a considerable financial commitment to the guy. I wonder for the Jays if the bigger concern is this news coming out of Philadelphia
Yeah.
than this $300 million price tag that really nobody is going to touch.
Yeah, the Philly stuff is interesting. So yeah, so yesterday as well, like I think like mere like an hour maybe after the John Heyman report, Matt Gelb and Ken Rosenthal released an article saying that Bo is going to meet with the Phillies on Monday, and that the Phillies interest is legitimate, and that for the Phillies it would signal the end of Alec Boehm and JT Realmuto's time there, and that they have kind of considered the entire picture of what a Bo Bichette signing would do. Obviously, Don Mattingly just signs there as the bench coach, and we've seen Bo and Mattingly kind of hanging around each other during spring training and in the dugout and stuff like that. So, obviously some relationship stuff there. I think it was Nightingale who said that once Mattingly landed with the Phillies, that Bo's interest increased there. So, again, could this be the Phillies kind of saying, "Hey, JT, like." Time to sign. It could be for sure, especially again in that article they said that Real Muto, they said that the Phillies had given Real Muto an offer, and obviously at this point he still hasn't signed. So how do you kind of weigh that? The Phillies catching situation is not particularly intact beyond Real Muto and that. So what would their situation look like? And then obviously they have Trey Turner playing shortstop, and they put in the piece that Bryson Stott would slide to third, and they would trade Alec Boehm. Like if they signed Bo, they've got a lot more work to do. But at the same time, like this is a team that has obviously the pockets to go out and sign big free agents. They've done it before. They've got they've already added Kyle Schwarber. They are in a pretty seemingly good spot for next year, and they're contenders. So could Bo land there? I mean, I certainly think that it is it would be a legitimate landing spot for him.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't discount the Phillies as a Bichette option. I mean, I think that pretty much 90% of baseball would do well to bring him on. About 40% of baseball is going to be willing to spend that kind of money, and that might even be on the high side. I think that, to me, again, as it pertains to the Jays, you're a little spooked by the possibility of him potentially going elsewhere before Kyle Tucker has ultimately made a
Yeah.
call, and you wonder if the Mets stuff around Tucker, if he goes there, is that a concern? Well, it sounds like they're not willing to go with term. Okay, well, you're still willing to give Tucker term. And okay, what about the Dodgers? Do the Dodgers have a spot for him? Do they have some stuff working in the background? What's going to happen? And as the Jays, it puts pressure on you to walk away with one of those two big fish. But if Bichette signs before Tucker, it really takes a bite out of your potential offseason. And the Jays to this point have already had a really strong offseason, pretty much a passing grade with flying colors as things stand today. But they're clearly short a big bat, And there are two very clear fits for the Blue Jays when it comes to those big bats in Tucker and Bichette. So you wonder if the Jays can, as has been widely reported, walk away with one of them, and what the team looks like. They become genuine. I don't know about World Series favorites just based on the presence of the Dodgers in baseball in 2026, but certainly they look like favorites to repeat in the American League. And walking away with neither of those guys, suddenly how much are you relying on Okamoto to be a Bichette replacement? How much are you betting on the rotation being really good despite, you know, the concerns around Cease and his underperforming FIP and Bieber's health and aging Gosman and this, that, and the other? Every team's going to have their question marks. I don't necessarily think the Jays are special in that way. Things could go sideways because that's how baseball works. You famously can't predict it. But I think that the Bichette stuff in particular, again, is it posturing? Possibly. It's kind of just the nature of this time of year when it comes to all of these free agents sitting around waiting to get deals done. But it does kind of create a bit of a conundrum for the Blue Jays if they do ultimately miss out on Bichette, because now suddenly all of your leverage with Kyle Tucker kind of goes out the window.
Yeah, no, I can't put it any better than that. If Bo goes elsewhere, the pressure to get a deal done with Cal Tucker is immense, right? And I mean, you look at the Blue Jays lineup as currently constructed, and we've seen reporting that the Blue Jays are comfortable with the offensive group they have right now. But when you look at it, it's lacking a guy who was MLB's hits leader and had a 134 WRC plus and was one of the best hitting shortstops in the league last year. And it feels like at minimum, you want to replace that spot in the lineup with the guy who did that or an upgrade, right? And we've seen the Alex Bregman stuff, and you think Okamoto's signing kind of takes him out of that, but as we've seen in recent days, like Heyman keeps on linking the Jays to Bregman when he discusses that. So if you miss out on Bichette and Tucker, like, are you going to sign Bregman? That again, like positional defensive positioning, like you don't really know what that looks like. And of course, they said that they view Okamoto as like a super utility player. And again, we'll kind of see how that plays out. I think that that's more just kind of them saying that at this point to keep all their options open as they try and figure out, what they're going to do in free agency. But I think the bottom line is like you need to upgrade or upgrade the group that you have right now at the top of your lineup with one of these two guys.
Yeah, it's not even you need to upgrade them. It's the fact of the matter is that these are two guys that can be anchors in your lineup
Yeah.
for years to come. you know, Bichette going to be 28 on opening day, I believe, and Tucker is 29, I think, right now. I don't know if he turns 30 before opening day. I don't believe he
He
does,
will
but
be 29 in 6 days,
like I mean, to me, it's two guys on the right side of 30
eight
that
days.
are
Tough
that
math.
are coming off that are coming off. Listen, we're not a math podcast, we're a Blue Jays podcast. Um, no, I mean, like it's very clear that these are two guys that you can pencil them in for the next 3, 4, 5 years, maybe longer, as genuinely elite contributors in the league. Tucker has been arguably a top 10 player in baseball. When he hasn't been hurt, he's been, you know, just outside of that tier of the Juan Sotos and the other elite outfielders of Major League Baseball, this side of Aaron Judge. I just to me there's a very obvious opportunity here for the Jays. It doesn't seem like they're done, but you need to be very careful here that if the Bichette stuff is if the clock is ticking there, you know, the heat on the burner is getting a little bit kind of, underneath the Jays' ass. It could get a little interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because it seemed like they've kind of been in the driver's seat for most of the offseason, right? And obviously, they went out and were aggressive with Cease. They maybe were like opportunistic in the Okamoto market, but they were also aggressive with Ponce and they were aggressive with Tyler Rogers, I think to a certain extent, right? Like they kind of, the Rogers one, obviously they kind of waited to see where the closers all went and then went out and did that deal. But um, with Tucker and Bichette, it's kind of seemed like they were towards the most aggressive teams early on them, and now it seems like they are kind of in the pack of teams waiting to see what happens. And, as soon as a team jumps out and is like, yeah, actually, Bo Bichette, like if we'll use the Phillies example, right? If the Phillies all of a sudden they're like, yeah, well, we're going to be aggressive on Bo, and they go out and get Bo, and then all it takes is another team to be aggressive on Tucker, and all of a sudden you're sitting on your hands and you're looking, oh, well, is Bregman going to be a good enough fit to kind of replace that production in our lineup? Like hard to say.
Yeah, he's probably at least a tier below Tucker, maybe in a comparable tier to Bichette, but oodles and oodles in terms of age. When we're talking on that front, is it's a totally different class. To me, I think the biggest kind of thing about this, it's really this 1-2, what's going to happen, and to a certain extent, this triumvirate of how do you solidify this Blue Jays offseason as very clearly the Dodgers of the East, basically. And if you are going to be one of those teams, if you are going to be a team that is going to dominate baseball, ideally, in a way that the Dodgers have, you're going to have to walk away with one of these big fish guys. And, by all indications, the Jays remain in the mix for them. Nothing has changed. But
But
again,
things
just
can change really quickly.
takes one phone call, is what they say. And to that end, I mean, again, Bichette suddenly looks like he might be a Philly. And if he's a Philly, what does that mean for the Jays and Tucker? Do they have any leverage in that spot? Maybe not. Well, are they going to give him $400 million? It doesn't seem like it. Well, if they're not going to give him $400 million, is he going to take a short-term deal? Who's going to give him a short-term deal? Well, the Mets are stalking and the Dodgers are stalking. It's only takes one phone call.
And I think this is all speculation, obviously. But like, say the Phillies add Bo Bichette, who else plays in the NL East that would say, oh, we need to answer the Mets. So, interesting time of year. We'll kind of see. Obviously the Bichette meeting scheduled for Monday. Do you expect like when do you expect like a resolution for either of these guys to come down?
It, it still feels like a February thing, which is a really depressing thing to say. But, I would not be shocked, maybe not February, but it would not stun me if, pitchers and catchers reported and, you know, it was kind of in the end game for one or both of those guys. It doesn't feel imminent. Even this Bichette stuff, it's just kind of the first thing to kind of, drip out of the kind of tap and, how long
Yeah.
for the Bichette stuff.
It's funny because you're right. Like we've kind of been sitting here, and it's like it's been this the same reporting kind of over and over. The Jays are the leaders as much as there can be a leader in free agency, right? And then we've kind of been sitting there with that, and then it's like, oh, the Mets aren't in, or the Mets are interested in like a short-term deal. The Dodgers are always around. The Yankees are locked in on Bellinger. Like we just haven't really gotten like a ton of reporting and rumors, and it's I don't know if that just kind of speaks to the market, if that speaks to where teams are with the lockout, if that or the potential lockout, if that's where teams are, with all of these top teams being well above the tax already. It's interesting the way that things have unfolded, like just so slowly, and not only for Tucker and Bo and Bregman and Bellinger, but for even like some of the other starters, right? Like Framber and Suarez and the guys of that ilk that are still just kind of sitting out there, and we haven't gotten a ton of updates on what could happen for them.
Yeah, there's still a number of nukes to be dropped here. this is, this offseason is, maybe timeline wise past the halfway mark, but in terms of free
Yeah.
agency dollars, there's still a lot to be spent here. There's still a lot to be determined.
Yeah, I think even like beyond that, you look at guys like Gino Suarez and Zach Gallen and guys kind of like that just kind of are still sitting out there and waiting for the top guys to go.
This episode of the Bird's Eye View podcast is brought to you by BioSteel. Use code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order at biosteel.ca. Again, that's code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order. For all your high performance hydration needs, visit biosteel.ca. Thank you again to BioSteel for sponsoring today's episode.
We can kind of move on to the arbitration stuff yesterday, but any last thoughts on Bo, Tucker, Bellinger thoughts at all? Like if they were to miss out on Tucker and Bo, like would Bellinger kind of do it for you
It's
or
they've been linked. I have a hard time seeing him go anywhere other than New York. If you remember a couple years ago, it was kind of a similar situation with Boston and JD Martinez, and it was kind of like he's gonna end up a Red Sox, and they waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. Kind of feels like that's where the Bellinger market is at right now.
yeah, it's interesting. Like I've seen, this is obviously not Blue Jays related, but the Yankees where it's like they offer Bellinger a 30 million AAV contract, and it's like, why wouldn't you maybe offer that to Kyle Tucker?
I don't know. Seems like maybe. I don't know. Listen, works for me.
All right, let's move on. The arbitration, the deadline to change exchange figures with arbitration eligible players came and passed yesterday. The Blue Jays agreed to terms with Dalton Varsho 10.75 million, Ernie Clement 4.6 million, and Tyler Heineman a $1.2375 million contract. I think they went over the MLB trade rumors estimates on all three of those guys, and then did not come to terms with Eric Lauer, who they will likely go to a hearing with. Of those three players, if I had to rank them in like the group of like how likely I thought they would be to like go to a hearing, I probably would have gone like Varsho, Clement, or so yeah, and then like Lauer and Heineman would have been at the bottom, but they went to a hearing with Vlad in 2024. Before that, they hadn't gone to a hearing since 2019, so not the most common thing for this front office, but Ben Nicholson Smith reports that Lauer filed at 5.75 million and the Jays filed at the MLB trade rumors prediction of 4.4. Um, like it's kind of a shoulder shrug, but also, it's not like an insignificant difference for arbitration, I guess.
Well, I do want to talk about the guys they did get deals with done super quickly. The Clement one, I don't think there was ever an extension coming. The Heineman stuff, certainly there wasn't. Are you surprised there wasn't any kind of talks of a longer term deal with Dalton Varsho?
I think for him, he's in a position where obviously he's a Boris client, so extensions are going to be tough anyways. But, for him, he's in a position where, he just had this season where he puts up a career high in WRC plus. I know he only played 70 games. He hit 20 home runs in those 70 games. And like, obviously he was hurt, but if he's able to come out and, post a WRC plus, maybe not 123, but something, in the 110 plus range and continue to play excellent defense, like he could be in for, a payday as like a consistent above average hitter rather than, kind of the guy that we saw his first couple years in Toronto where he was checking in as like a league average hitter to below league average hitter, but an excellent defender, right? And if he comes out and let's say next year that his barrel rate increase stays the same, his hard hit stays the same, the home run to fly ball ratio kind of stays the same because it seems like he definitely figured something out last year with the way that he was hitting home runs in the minors and spring training, and he just wasn't able to stay healthy. But if any of those gains stick next year, like this is like a perennial like all-star 5 win type player. So
Yeah.
so to me, like if you're him, you're obviously going to feel confident in your ability to go out and do what you just did, but over the course of 150 games, and then earn away longer. And who's to say that they don't come to an extension here in the next couple months? But I just think him being a Boris client, the potential earnings that he can create for himself by having a good season, I think is just probably maybe even a non-starter there.
Like an extension today for Dalton Varsho was under $100 million pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
And if he is like a 105 WRC plus guy and continues to be a top three defensive center fielder in baseball, like, are we talking about him probably doubling his earnings potentially? I
Yeah.
mean,
I
not
mean, if
implausible.
if Cody Bellinger is getting offered, $30 million AAV, then, if you're Varsho, you certainly could be looking as well. I am definitely worth like 20 kind of thing. So, the Lauer stuff though. I mean, obviously, kind of a lot goes into it with Lauer having gone to Korea and then coming back on a minor league deal before he left for Korea. He was, of course, in the arbitration system with the Brewers, and he had earned, I believe it was 5.075 million. So obviously, he's coming back and thinking, well, I'm coming back into the system, so I'm going to file for 5.75. The Blue Jays are filing at 4.4 because, that's kind of where the estimate landed based on the season that he put together. But I mean, if you were an arbitrator tomorrow, whose side are you picking in that one?
I can't, I'm not impartial. You know what? I mean, I understand that there's precedent to guys leaving, coming back, and picking up kind of where they left off. I do wonder if it is going to be a case where the deal that he had just signed was for, I want to say $2 million. Like, you talk about like the graduation in arbitration, how that tends to work. Going from there to almost six. I mean, for a guy, you know, at that end of the pay spectrum would be an enormous jump. Tripling his salary basically.
Yeah.
I think that, the 4.4 figure, I'm inclined to kind of buy that based on the trade rumors figure. But again, I think that if there's precedent,
Yeah.
that's kind of the big question mark. You know, if guys have left and come back and then basically picked up where they left off on the pay scale,
Then he's
then
gonna
yeah, he's
get,
going to get
yeah.
575. But, you know, we don't know. I mean, arbiters, by all accounts, they're not necessarily baseball fans. They kind of are labor lawyers that look at the numbers and are like, okay, well, very clearly the comparisons to XYZ are stronger than ABC. And if Lauer can, go to arbitration and be like, hey, here's Joe Schmo and Bob Tugnut and XYZ, and these guys all left for Japan and came back and got their paydays after all, then he's going to get that 575. Um, the thing that maybe concerns me, but really to a lesser extent, is the ARB system tends to be pretty vicious. And, there would never have been an intention to keep Lauer around particularly long term, but it's just, you try to avoid the ARB system as much as you can because it's a really vicious system by all accounts. You basically go in there and tell this player you were such hot ass last year. Of course, you don't deserve that number
Hey,
that you
Eric, your 3.18 ERA for us last year, where you saved our rotation, awful stuff.
nonsensical. You know, what's he gonna get? If I were a betting man, I do lean that 4-4 number. I think that, you know, based on the historical comps, clearly that's the likelier scenario. But I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this on labor law when it comes to Major League Baseball. Maybe next year when the lockout happens, I'll have a different discussion. But I'd be very surprised if he got that 575 number.
I think he will get it. I think that there's precedent for guys to go over and come back and then just jump right back in. I think that's all that Lauer and his agents are going to have to prove, and just say people coming back over from Korea just jumped back into the arbitration system and then got their pay bump. So, but yeah, I think you kind of covered it all there. I think the really interesting thing from yesterday, again, like maybe not Jays related, but the Skubal difference where he files at 32 and the Tigers file at 19. If arbitrators give him $32 million in his hearing, they could that could seriously change, I think, the arbitration system going forward. But
I mean, that would be far and away, I think, the largest ARB award ever, I think.
Soto got 31, but Scuba would be jumping from like 15. He'd be getting like a $15 million pay jump. So
Enormous. And the thing is, too, apparently, is that because he's, ARB 3, there's an additional pool he can pull from in free agency and 1 year
yeah, like he can
deals.
compare himself to anybody in baseball. So
Yeah. And I mean, because you look at this David Price comparison apparently, and Price was ARB 4, not ARB 3, but based on, inflationary costs, the time, it's a lot
yeah,
closer to that, 30 million figure. That's going to be a super fascinating kind of through line. And I mean, we knew they weren't going to extend him, but I mean, this probably all but seals that.
yeah. If he, man, it like if the Tigers trade him, I already ranted about this. We're not going down that road again. But yeah, will be interesting to kind of see how things end up there. Obviously, kind of carries importance, I think, for the entirety of baseball.
Here's
What comes out of that?
here's a ludicrous thought for you.
Are you gonna say
So,
Jays trade for Skubal or?
no, not trade for Scooble, but he does his 1 year deal and walks to free agency. I mean, if Tucker isn't in the picture, I mean, could you see a Scooble pivot? I mean, that's way down the line. But
I mean, well, you're losing Gosman, you're losing Springer, you're losing Varsho.
just keep an eye on that Scooble stuff. Just maybe keep tabs.
I like love Scooble. Obviously, like I've been in on Scooble for many years at this point, but um, his contract I think will be a little bit scary for whoever signs it because like, how much are you paying for past production versus future production
Yeah.
with a
With
guy?
any starting pitcher, really.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, he should probably age well though, right? Because he wasn't like eating up a ton of innings at a young age, but and we've seen like veteran starters age well, but there's probably, not to put it out there, but there's like probably you're giving him a $400 million contract. You're probably going to lose 1 year of that. We'll say.
Probably. Probably.
All right. Other kind of news and notes. Obviously we come back from a break earlier this week when they signed Okamoto, and check out our episode with Guy Jim Baseball on that. Some good stuff there. Even while we were away, I don't think we really, missed a ton of Jays news because things were just so quiet. But in recent days, we've also seen Baseball America and Baseball Prospectus both update their top Jays prospect lists, and I don't think there's very many surprises from either of them. I think you get a Baseball America, it's Trey Savage, and then it's Arjun Nimmala, then Jojo Parker, then Johnny King, then Gage Stanford, then Ricky Tiedemann, Juan Sanchez, RJ Schreck, Jake Bloss, and Jake Cook. And then on the Baseball Prospectus side, it's Trey Savage, Jojo Parker, Johnny King, Arjun Nimmala, Ricky Tiedemann, Gage Stanford, Juan Sanchez, Josh Kasevich, Victor Arias, and Jake Bloss. Kind of checks out to me. Like obviously they're both very similar. Obviously, Nimmala further down Baseball Prospectus and Stanifer ahead of Tiedemann on Baseball America, I think are like the most notable things. But like to you,
Yeah, maybe the King over Nimala stuff as well. A
yeah,
little bit
on
notable for
Prospectus, yeah.
perspective. We'll have a whole episode, probably later this month on everything Blue Jays. Once Pipeline gets the top 100 out, and surely a Savage will be featured all over that. And I'd imagine probably King is probably in the mix in a little bit there, and several other Blue Jays. But I think that, if there is any takeaway at all from these prospect lists, I mean, I think that the big one is the down arrow on Arjun Amala is compelling, but the up arrow on Johnny King clearly kind of in the other direction.
Yeah, I like Parker getting two from Prospectus. I mean, he'll be certainly an interesting storyline to watch this year as he makes his pro debut, and kind of sounds like he will be starting the year in Dunedin, which is going to be a fun challenge for him. I will mention I was listening to a Baseball America podcast with Jeff Ponce and JJ Cooper, and they were talking about the number one prospect in baseball at this time in 2027 or the end of 2026. And Arjun Namala's name did come up. So Baseball America still high on Arjun Namala. I know, some of the shine has come off there, but I think I don't know whether he's going to start the year in Double A or Vancouver, but I think important year for him this year. Like he's either, he's still so young. He's like going to be 20, but like kind of a sink or swim for his like prospect status, I would say, year. And then, obviously beyond that, he can still figure it out because he's so young. But gonna be interesting to see what he does.
Yeah, the pathway for him to be the best prospect in baseball is maybe a narrow one, but a top 20 prospect in baseball, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not impossible to see that avenue being continues to play strong shortstop defense and continues to tap into his power and cuts down a little bit on the strikeouts, and all of a sudden you've got the makings of guy up the middle with big power and the ability to put the ball in play and the ability to remain at shortstop. And all of a sudden, that's a really, really valuable prospect.
Yeah.
You know, exactly what the future holds for him, I guess we'll see. But, there's guys in the farm, don't forget about the
Yeah.
farm.
Yeah, no, it's big year. I mean, obviously I'm, very dialed on prospects and everything, but I think Jojo Parker, Johnny King, Arjun Amala, Gage Standifer, Juan Sanchez, like those are five really intriguing stories about how they
Just
perform in
just maybe
2026.
maybe circle those names.
Yeah, as we kind of move along here in the off season, like that'll be something we talk about. Obviously, we'll start to lock in here on the World Baseball Classic as it approaches. Some Canadian baseball news in recent days. I think Jameson Taillon commits to Canada for the World Baseball Classic, which is a pretty significant addition for the rotation, which had seemingly been lacking with the lack of Nick Pivetta, we'll call it. So, you land, I think, what is going to be Canada's ace, unless, maybe Jonah Tong steps in and steps up really big. But I think Tyone obviously, brings that veteran experience and will is a great addition. And then Owen Casey finally gets traded. Obviously, he's been the top Canadian position player prospect for some time at this point and had been blocked in Chicago by their crowded outfield. And now he goes to Miami in the Edward Cabrera trade. Peter Bendix also said that Casey will still be playing for Canada. The intention is that he's still going to play for Canada at the World Baseball Classic. So good news there, even as he's going to be competing for a spot on opening day. But a couple pieces of fun news there. I mean, you got any thoughts on Tyone or Casey?
Yes, we are a Canadian baseball podcast after all. The Casey stuff is cool. Nice to see him get an opportunity to play. He has been blocked for some time now. So it should be really cool, really fun that he's really going to get a shot to be a part of a kind of young and up and coming outfield for the
Yeah.
Marlins. Him, obviously, you've got
Stowers,
Stowers
yeah,
and
Marcy.
Marcy. I always mix him up with that other guy. Whatever. Nonetheless, there's a couple of fun young names there in Miami in the outfield. That's a fun group.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, the NL Rookie of the Year race, I think Casey, could we get a Canadian Rookie of the Year again? That would be pretty cool. Him and
Yeah,
him and Tong actually, both of them competing for it.
I think that'd be fun. It'd be pretty good. I mean, listen, the 2026 WBC team might not benefit from that, but maybe the 29 team. We've got two all-stars in the mix there. I don't know.
Yeah.
See. We'll see.
Um, Tyone, I mean, yeah, like I said, big for the rotation. It's funny because like obviously other teams are dropping like commitment videos in Canada. We're kind of getting, like not official word, but we're getting like they're likely to play or they're interested in playing. It's kind of like, nothing is official until like the roster announcement really, because guys can get hurt in spring. I'm sure that teams are still trying to figure out, like is Jonathan gonna be a Met in 2026 is certainly maybe something that's up in the air, but no, it's nice that we're getting some news and cool to see a number of Canadians again on the
I
move
th
this winter.
I think you had mentioned, I don't remember if it was after we'd hit the record button a number of weeks ago or before we'd hit a record button, that the fact that it's in Puerto Rico instead of on US soil,
Yes.
I wonder if that's playing a role here.
I think the pitching side definitely gets hurt by that because they if you're a Jonathan, if you're a Mitch Bratt types, right? Like you're not wanting to leave your camp for a significant amount of time when you're trying to fight for a spot and try and impress your major league coaching staff to go to Puerto Rico and pitch, one game kind of thing. So
Yeah. Doesn't really doesn't help the team. But again, the WBC stuff, I mean, as stuff comes out, it'll
yeah,
definitely be something we cover. Big plans I think this year for us to particularly cover that. So just keep an eye out. There'll be some fun stuff to come.
it is a fun tournament and it's shaping up to be a really good one this year. So, you got anything else? Canada, Jays, Casey, Tyone, Tucker, Bo, Bellinger, Bregman,
Some
Scooble.
transactions, please. That's all I'm asking for.
It's time. It's time. It's January 9th. Please let's get things going. All right. Well, with that, that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening along on the audio provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter. And the pod is at BED_pod. Thank you so much for listening.